Illegal immigration is in the geopolitical spotlight due to the Trump administration's crackdown on undocumented migrants. 4 batches of deportees have already been sent to India in what could be just a start of many flights to follow. Indians make up the largest group of undocumented migrants from Asia in the U.S. Pew Research Center puts the number at 725,000, and that's almost the population of Bhutan. This week, CNA correspondent explores why so many people risk their lives and a lifetime of savings to take the perilous journey to America. And to tell us more about this episode, we have CNA's Neha Poonia joining us now bright and early there in New Delhi. Good morning, Neha. Thank you so much for joining us. It's really a story of illegal migrants from India taking their journey to the U.S., and it's been making the news in India and also came up when Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi visited the U.S. recently.
Good morning. That's right. I mean, this is a story that's not new. The story of illegal Indians traveling to the U.S. or from other parts of the world heading to America is not new. But since President Trump's return to the White House, it has been in the headlines here nearly every single day. The local media here breathlessly covering the return of those 4 batches of illegal Indians. 300 plus now have been returned. And India and the U.S. have reportedly identified 18,000 that will be deported in the coming weeks. And like you said, this issue was also something that was brought up by the Trump administration on the very first day after President Trump resumed office, asking India to tackle the issue of irregular migration. Prime Minister Modi discussed this with President Trump at the White House 2 weeks ago on his visit to the US as well. And India's response has been categorical that it's its responsibility to take these illegal migrants back, and that illegal migration is not good for any country. India has also downplayed how these migrants have been returned with their arms and legs shackled on military flights. The experts have been speaking to say there's a reason why Prime Minister Modi and his government's response has been so measured, because they don't want to be appearing to be hampering what is clearly a key policy priority for Trump's second tenure. My colleague in the US, Tony Waterman, explains just how expansive President Trump's crackdown on illegal migrants has been in the last few weeks.
Mass deportations were a central pillar of Donald Trump's re-election bid. And as U.S. president, he's wasted no time trying to fulfill a promise to expel the largest number of undocumented migrants in American history.
I, Donald John Trump.
Within days of taking office last month, he declared a national emergency, sent thousands of troops to the U.S. border, directed immigration raids, and cut off legal pathways to asylum. And that appears to be just the beginning. For the estimated 11 million people living in the U.S. without the proper paperwork, it's a nerve-wracking time, especially as stories emerge of people with no criminal records being caught in the dragnet.
And that's the sentiment that Prime Minister Modi echoed as well when he was speaking alongside President Trump in that rare press conference. He said a lot of the Indians going to the US are people from ordinary families who've been lured by this big American dream. And that is the case. I mean, when you speak to some of these families, you understand that there's a desperation, which is what's driving them out in such large numbers.
Well, you know, Neha, undocumented migrants in the U.S. and you've yourselves met and spoke to some of their families in India. What did you hear from them?
That's right. I mean, since President Trump's return to the White House, we've been looking into this story and trying to understand who these people are, where they come from, and what's driving them out. And we found through our research that a majority of these Indians come from 3 big Indian states, the states of Haryana and Punjab in northern India and the state of Gujarat in western India. For our story, we traveled about 3 hours west of New Delhi to the state of Haryana, where we went into a village which is unlike any Indian village I've ever seen. It's so quiet because nearly every person of working age there is out of the country, a majority of them having traveled to the US illegally. We tried to speak to many families on camera, but many were hesitant, understandably so. Many told us that they're worried, talking about their children's journeys to the US could trigger action against them at a time when this is a big topic of conversation in the US. But we did speak to one village senior, 40-year-old Gurudev, whose 20-year-old son is in the US, who also traveled there illegally. He's now legal. He has a work permit. But Gurudev told me that, he's living every day steeped in anxiety because he doesn't know what will happen to his son, whether Trump could expel him. Gurudev is getting some financial aid from his son who's in the US. And it's that story that's, getting other kids in the village to try and still consider going into the US as well. We spoke to another youngster, 28-year-old Mandeep, who tried to enter the US, but he only reached the Mexico border where he was deported from. And now he's been banned by the Mexican government for the next 5 years.
So Mandeep made the journey, but didn't really make it into the US. How did he get from India to the US then?
Well, I spoke to Mandeep about this, and his journey and his route is not uncommon. Many, like Mandeep, have tried to take the legal route. He told me that he looked into it, but he won't make the cut because he doesn't have the requisite English language speaking skills. He doesn't have, the educational qualifications that's needed to get a work visa for the US, which is why then many boys in the village have done what Mandeep did as well. They raised money by selling their meager land holdings. Mandeep did this too. And then he approached an illegal travel agent who then put him in touch with, human traffickers and smugglers who tried to get Mandeep into the US. And when he was recounting this journey, Mandeep told me that he cannot believe still that he made it back home in one piece. The journey over land and sea lasted more than 6 months and is called the donkey route, or donkey colloquially. It saw Mandeep flying from Delhi to Dubai, then taken to Libya and onwards to Italy on an overloaded boat. His next stop was Spain by road, before he was flown to South America. And there began the perilous journey from one end of the continent to Mexico on foot, walking for months. Trekking through the Darien Gap, one of the world's most notoriously treacherous crossings in the jungles of Panama and Colombia.
That is quite the journey there, Neha. It's definitely not easy. So much of risks involved, and not just risks physically. We also have to speak about the money that's involved. How much did it cost him?
Absolutely. I mean, it's not cheap. Mandeep told me he paid this travel agent who then passed on the money to the human smugglers. He paid them $50,000 US. And Mandeep is, he comes from a small farmer family. They don't have that much money, so he raised it by selling his meager land holdings. And he told me that some others in his group, none of whom made it into the US, paid twice as much. And now as, plane after plane of illegal Indians are coming back and they're talking to their families and to the media here, they're all recounting that they took the same journey at the same cost.
Well, so it's both costly and also incredibly arduous. What is it that makes Indians like Mandeep not give up, to really give up their lands, their savings to do this? What do they believe is waiting for them in the US?
It's remarkable, really, because this is exactly the same question I asked Mandeep time and again when I was speaking to him. And he told me it's simple. He said he wants a better life. He wants to live that American dream. He has friends in the US who've made it into the country illegally. And he says they're living, their best version of their life. They're sending money back to their parents, who are then using that money to build new homes in their villages. They're, getting their sisters and their other children educated. And Mandeep says that, it's that dream which had forced him to take this risk. And he's actually willing to go back to the US. He's saying he'll try another crossing. And I asked him, what sort of work does he expect to do in the US? And he says, he's willing to drive a truck, work in a field, work at a grocery store. He's happy to do whatever work he can find, but he wants to be living and working in the US, which he thinks is the land of equal opportunities for everyone.
We've heard about this many a times. It's even a status quo sometimes. But what really fuels this belief that their lives will be better in the US, even if they will be doing, as you've said, menial jobs, living undocumented lives, and even hiding from authorities? Is this all worth it?
Absolutely. Mandeep said, he's willing to play with death. Those were his words to get into the US. And he said, he believes that a better life is waiting for him there. And, when you speak to other villagers, you try and understand what the reason behind this is. One big reason is popular culture, how life in America is portrayed in TV shows and movies, especially by the Indian film industry, Bollywood, where you'll see people living in the US, living their best life, working in big offices, sending money back to their parents. And, that's the sort of dream that many regular Indians like Mandeep aspire to. And of course, the second aspect is what Mandeep is seeing around him. We were talking to him on the roof of his house, and every few minutes his gaze kept straying, and I asked him, what are you looking at? And he said, can you see all of these new houses? All of these new houses have been built by my friends who are in the US. They've sent money back to their parents. So that's the aspiration that he's seeing being executed in front of his eyes.
Well, Neha, thank you so much for sharing with us this huge, arduous journey that many have been making. That was Neha Poonia in New Delhi on why so many Indians are braving a treacherous journey to enter the US illegally. And CNA will have a more in-depth look at the story and President Trump's crackdown on migrants in this week's CNA Correspondent, The Day the Dream Died, tonight at these times.